have made the assumption as well that although I've always known Islam is a very peaceful religion, very loving, that their societies and their governments and their politics are still based around Quranic teaching. So, you know, I was surprised to learn that there is a large number of Muslims here that still believe in being, or that do believe in being secular and having the separation of church from state. So that really, you know, I wasn't like surprised, but it was just interesting to learn. And then the other thing is that I've been thinking about how many parallels there are between the current political atmosphere here and what we've been going through in America for a long time now, as far as, you know, we have a group of fundamentalist Christians that think that America is a Christian nation, period, and that freedom of religion means freedom of Christianity, and that all of our laws should be based on Christianity, and the Constitution was, you know, written for Christianity, and all that good stuff. And that there's this group of Islamists here, and it's the same thing for them, you know, taking the Quran literally and wanting to translate that into their government and everything. So I drew that parallel. Also, what you said, Dan, about how the government funds the mosques here, I wanted to also draw a parallel to the USA in that although we don't fund our churches, they are tax exempt. Yeah. So, you know, even though we have that separation of church and state in the United States, they don't pay any taxes. And I've heard that, you know, if we had just charged taxes to the religious institutions in the U.S., we would be making billions of dollars, you know, of revenue, you know, for the nation. So that's just a few parallels that I've been, you know, noticing since I've been here.
Other comments, questions?
I do. This is in regards to Ms. Gatlin's observations. She kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but
Sorry.
it's all right. It's all right. So it was. I guess I'm under the impression that ARAMFO is an organization sort of have this goal to create a bridge between the Arab world and the Western world, and to bring some truths back. So I had kind of been putting some thought into what is it that I have noticed that I had the wrong interpretation about, and it was about women. Honestly, that was the biggest thing. And I just thought it was a short story to talk. I was talking to this young lady, and we had got to know each other a little bit, and I said, "How do you feel about the treatment of women here?" And she kind of like looked at me funny and was like, "Why do people keep asking about that?" And I realized that this women's oppression thing is something that we may have created a little bit. I mean, certainly there's issues, but don't we have issues as well? I mean, women's oppression. So that's just been the biggest takeaway for me, and it's part of my studies. So I really appreciate it. And I really like that you have the interest in women's studies as well. It kind of helps me to make those observations. So it's been fantastic. So thank you.
The biggest thing that surprised me is that I thought when we came here that people were going to really tiptoe around us, and not that they weren't going to be honest with us and express their real opinions about things. But I found quite the opposite. And I love that people are really forward. I mean, they really are opinionated. And I think even though a lot of Egyptians that we've talked to sadly seem really pessimistic, I think that that's the thing that is going to save this country, is that Egyptians, everyone I've talked to, even on the plane, outside, in the universities, the professors, whether they're poor or rich, they're all super passionate about all of this. And they're all really outspoken, and they're really not afraid. Now that they can speak, they want to speak. So I'm really glad that we got, and you know, I'm glad we got both sides of the argument, because now we can really make our own minds about what we think. So that was awesome. I think it's awesome that the Egyptian people are so forthcoming with us.
One of my favorite moments was when we had the representative from the Muslim Brotherhood, Mr. El Morsi, and Dr. What was her? Fatima was right there, moderating. What's her name?
Fatma.
And obviously they disagree. And they were right there engaging each other at certain points, and neither of them were really pulling any punches. I was really impressed with that too.
Sam and Sarah.
I think the part I really like the most so far is getting to interact with the Egyptian students, like, not just for like, you know, that they're so much fun, but getting to talk with them in their conversation. They have so much insight, especially on the revolution, and so many of them were a part of the revolution. One of them was shot in the revolution. Like, I was not even expecting to get to talk to people who were there, but it was so common for them to have been there during the protests, and that really shocked me. And like, I think that's kind of what my biggest impression of Egypt has come from so far, is getting to interact with these kids who are our age and have already done so much with being a part of their own democracy.
Come on, Sarah, and then we'll go over to.
Well, what I thought was really interesting was you prepared us so well, just from like classes most of us have taken with you between social movements and religion, but just the reading and things we had to do for this class and meeting all year, that we were so prepared for the revolution and what to expect when talking to people. But I had no idea what to expect with like coming to Egypt, like what was going to be here in general. Like, I've never thought that deeply about what's in Egypt other than the pyramids. And so like coming here, I think the biggest shock for me was just the culture shock between like them throwing trash everywhere and burning it, and they still smoke inside, and they don't. We've seen like 3 traffic lights and they're just blinking yellow. So I don't know, I think the biggest thing for me was culture shock, because I had no idea what to expect, and every day I'm blown away with something different that I don't expect. Even just having to pay to use public bathrooms, and people like constantly asking for money, and you don't know if they're homeless or you're supposed to be giving them money.
I paid her to say the first part.
Well, one thing that I thought was really interesting is I was under the impression coming in here that as America, we were always kind of trying to force our democracy upon people. But then, since talking to people, I mean, we met a guy who was shot in the revolution here, and then a man who, from the Libya revolution, was shot here. And the fact that they were willing to take bullets and die for democracy was something that was kind of intriguing to me, and realized that, I mean, it was something that people were passionate about and that they wanted more than anything. And that was really amazing to me, to really get that perspective that I had never gotten before.
So next time you complain about waiting in line to vote, sometimes the alternative. Yeah, no, you're right. It's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say something else also, while I realized that there's way more important things happening here right now. Being an archaeology student, obviously, I've been very concerned about the monuments since the revolution, and I've been, you know, reading things and hearing things about how there's all this encroachment and, you know, damage and stealing and all that. And, you know, I was really happy to talk to the Egyptologists that were our tour guides, as well as several students at the universities that are studying to be Egyptologists, and they tell me no. You know, the group of Islamists that are against having monuments here is so small, there's no way anything would ever happen to these places. And the people that live here depend on the monuments for their, you know, tourism, for the economics. So everybody who lives here has a certain amount of respect for their, you know, their history and the monuments here. And I just wanted to say that because, you know, obviously the revolution and all that is very important, but we can't forget that, you know, the archaeological state is very tied into everything else that's happening, being as how people come here to see the archaeology and the history that's here in Egypt. So that's what I had to say about that as well.
I would second pretty much everything that's been said, but I actually have a question. Probably primarily for Catlin, but I think Dr. Berry will probably be able to chime in as well. I'm curious how much of our interaction with the students, which I also loved, was sort of a breakdown of traditional student age roles within society in Egypt. I mean, obviously it was sort of an isolated incident on a bus with a bunch of students from 2 different countries getting together, meeting each other, and I'm curious sort of especially about the gender dynamics there, because there's certainly an interesting dynamic between male and female students interacting cross-culturally, and how much of that is something that they would go into on their own among Egyptian students, and how much of that was just because it was the novelty of being among a group of U.S. students, and sort of what your takes are on that.
Well, I'll certainly let Abir address this as well. So they worked at the Student Center, these students, and so they were asked if they would, number one, just be available to meet us and talk to us and whatever. And of course, I definitely had the impression that they were completely delighted to serve in that role. And so, but there is a certain amount of orchestration, I would say. However, it's also an opportunity. And as Kathleen, who married the Egyptian, and she came when we were completely jet-lagged that first night, one of the things that she said that really struck me as I was talking to her afterward is she said that foreigners have this sort of dual role where they're really respected. I mean, some of you were already in here, but half of us just got our picture taken with the wedding party. So they were like, come, we want you in the picture. And we're like, okay.
But it wasn't even just the wedding party. The bride and her father had stepped out to walk out, and they said, "Oh, photo." like the scariest moment of your life. Both for the father and the bride. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so there is this certain just appreciation for the novelty of foreigners, and yet simultaneously there's also definitely the perception, not from the students, but necessarily, but the perception, that the exchange rate is definitely on our favor, and there's an awareness of that, and then there's sort of the multiplicity of perspectives on what the U.S.'s involvement has been in the revolution, and if that's been a good thing or a bad thing, or if the U.S. has been too involved or not involved enough, then, there's this whole dynamic around foreigners and that intercultural connection that I think you're picking up on. And yeah, I've been